All right, guys, what's up? It's Miller. I was gonna make this my first live stream, but that didn't work. But that's all right. I'm still gonna do a nice long form video, walk you through what I'm doing, and won't be a whole lot of B-roll and editing in this one. But I've got a knife for a friend. This is not a paying customer, even though I'm sure he would. He loves the sharpness of my knives. But payment on this one is going to be with the brisket that he is going to cook and cut. This is actually the longest blade that I've had the opportunity to sharpen so far. So I'm gonna get that ready in just 1 second. Now, one thing that I never do with a knife is I never put it directly in these milled metal clamps. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a little bit of masking tape and just put that right on the spine of the blade. This allows me to clamp the knife and not mar up the surface. I even do this with like utility knives and stuff because, you know, if the customer put the scratches on there, then that's on them. But I'm not putting scratches on anybody's knife, not intentionally at least, or not by mistake. So get this in my clamp, and since this is the longest knife I've done, I put all 3 of my clamps onto my TSprof. Once it's in here, I'll show you how I'm going to do this. It's a little snug, actually. Hold on. Let me loosen this up just a little bit more. This knife is a little thicker on the spine than the last one I sharpened, so my clamp is not perfectly set up to take it. Once I get that in there, it'll be just fine. There we go. Take this little bit extra off. Alright, so now when I'm tightening this thing down, I tighten the first screws, the ones closest to the blade. This locks it in. And then I come to the screw behind it, and this kind of brings the rear portion of the spring up, pushes a little pressure back down on the tip of the clamp. This just is like extra tightness. Guarantee that this knife is going nowhere. Yep. Now, this knife's already pretty sharp, so I'm not gonna have to, it doesn't have any damage, so I'm not gonna take it all the way down to like the 60 or the 80 grit stones. Like that would just be too much. Not unless I had to completely put a new cutting edge on this knife, but by the feel of it, it already feels pretty sharp. Ooh, you know what? That's not going to work very well. Looks like I'm going to have to make an adjustment here. Like I said, this is the longest knife I've had to work with, so I'm going to just pull this blade back just a little so that it's not hitting the table when I go to flip it. Now I've got reservations at a restaurant tonight, so this video is not going to be very long. I have to keep an eye on the clock. There we go. That'll work. Yep, I've got to keep an eye on the clock and get this done lickety split. But I'm not going to rush it. So I've got a little bit of time. I'm just not going to spend all day chatting and not sharpening. Alright, so as I've explained in a previous video, I've got to find the edge on this knife. And so I'm going to use a marker for that. Once I've found the angle of the edge, then I can match that using my digital protractor, which was pretty cheap. I think it was 12 bucks on, it was either eBay or Amazon, one of them. And I should have got both sides all in one shot. Yep, sure did. Now, bring this back over. And being it's pretty sharp, I'm just going to start with 400 grit. In this instance, since I'm not grinding, I don't need it to be soaking wet. In fact, if it is soaking wet, it's not going to be good for that marker. It'll wash the marker away instead of gently scratching it away. So now I'm not going to start scraping yet. I'm going to try and look and see with my flashlight, look near this edge, see if there's any air between the stone and the blade. And looking at it, it doesn't appear to be. In fact, it appears to be pretty darn close. So I'm going to give this a couple of gentle scrapes across and see where it's landing on this. Oh my, it's pretty close. It's catching that bottom edge a little bit. I'm going to take my protractor like I showed in the previous video, calibrate it to 0, and then put it on. So it's saying it's 17.8, which actually sounds about right for a cooking knife, one like this. I set it exactly at 18. Let's see how that looks on the edge. I'm not sure if I have to go a little bit more shallow. I have to go a little bit steeper. You know what? I think when I start grinding this down, I'm going to drop it back to a 220 grit to start, just to guarantee that I get that angle in there just right. Let me see what the angle on this side is, in case they are different. .4. Not quite on. Zero that out again. 17.7. Whoa. Whoa. Okay, I'm going to split the difference because this is saying 18.2. $17.8, so that should be even on both sides now. Now there's a little knob back here. Once I make the adjustment using this knob, I can lock it in using this one, and it won't go up or down. All right, so now that we've got our angle determined, I'm going to put my first set of stones on. I'm going to start with this 220 grit. Like I said, it's already pretty sharp, so I'm not like redesigning this blade. And then I'm also going to adjust my stopper. What I don't want is for this blade to slip forward or backwards. Now see, if I were working this, right, see how far that goes back past the blade's edge? If I don't set this stopper, that stone might accidentally slide up over the side of the blade and scratch it, gouge it even, and we don't want that. Thank goodness this has a stopper. I've seen other systems, not to talk bad on them, but other systems like the Lansky that just have a stick goes through their little angle guide, and that stick there's nothing stopping it from actually causing damage to the blade. So that's no good. All right, so now we've got our stopper going forward, got our stopper going back. No chance of sliding over. Even with a little bit of pressure, this is spring assisted stopper right here, which is great because you can feel it when you're grinding. All right, so let's get going. I'll wet this 220 one more time and we will start going. Now, somebody recently asked me to give a little bit of explanation on what I'm doing with my stones as I'm sharpening the blade, because they wanted to know, is there a technique, like is there like a pattern or a rhythm or something? And the answer is yes, and this goes for just about anybody's knife sharpening, whether you're using a stone or a jig. You've got to have a rhythm, you got to have a little bit of timing down, you got to do a little bit of counting, and the angle at which you sharpen matters as well, and I will explain that here. So the first stone that I use, I plan ahead of time what the pattern is going to be for how I'm going to sharpen it. And in this case, I plan on starting with a angle slighted, leaning forward to the nose and then back towards the heel or the handle. So that's this angle right here. Meaning when I'm pulling down on my strokes, it's coming down and towards the handle in a very diagonal pattern. So when I flip the knife over, I reverse that so that that pattern stays the same going from the tip to the handle. All right, so now you can see that my pattern is going diagonal the other way. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, like, what difference does that make? Why would I do that? And I didn't know it until I was learning how to polish knives to a mirror finish, that the grit of the stone can be left behind when you get all the way to your final polish. Or scratches, scratches from the grit of the stone can be left behind. The idea behind polishing is you start with a low grit, like I've got these, and then you work your way up to a higher grit. And the higher and higher grit you get, the less abrasive each one of those stones are going to be. And they polish off the scratches from the grit before. So I'm starting with a 220 grit. The next set will be 400, which means it's a finer stone. And that will polish off the scratches from the 220. But when they're that close in grit, it's kind of hard to notice them, the scratches. And it's even more difficult to notice whether you've gotten all the scratches out from the grit before if all the scratch patterns are going in the same direction. This is why angle matters. If you want to get a nice, refined polish to any blade, even if it's the profile of the knife, the side of the blade, I'm not referring to only the edge, but if you wanted to get a nice mirror finish on the knife that you've been working on the side, you're going to want to follow similar steps to this. And just because my hand motion likes to work at a diagonal doesn't mean it has to be a diagonal. So if you wanted to, your pattern could be for one stone, side to side, all the way across. And that's perfectly fine. And then your next pattern, you could go straight perpendicular to the blade. You can do the same thing with stones or sandpaper or anything else that you're using. But what you want to do is, before you get to your next grit, you want to check and make sure that the entire length of your blade has, one, all the marker gone, and two, that same consistent scratch pattern, identical scratch pattern all the way down. And when you get all the way to the finer and finer grits, like 1,000 and 2,000, it becomes really difficult to see that scratch pattern without a very bright light. So I always keep a nice LED flashlight nearby, and I've got my LED lights above me, and at just the right angle I can see the individual scratches all going in that pattern that I was sharpening in. And once I've gotten the whole length of the blade done, by then, just looking at the scratches, you should be able to tell that you should be able to notice that you'll get a burr. And the lower the grit stone, the more robust the burr is going to be, until you get all the way up to these beautiful polishing tapes and leather strops. Right here I have a American cowhide leather strop with, I believe it's an, I'm guessing right now, I believe they said it was an 8 micron or 10 micron polishing compound, which I think is, I'm not an expert on this, not yet, not the polishing compounds, but I think that's like the equivalent of like a 1,500 or a 1,200 grit. But that is only used to remove the final burr, which the polishing tapes will do that also, and we will get to them very shortly. Like I had mentioned, you want to make sure that the whole blade is consistent consistently sharpened equally. You don't want to spend too much time in any particular one area. It's kind of why you want to just go all the way down and then all the way back. And you want to kind of keep a rhythm, count in your head how many strokes you're giving each side. That way, this side of the blade sharpens at about the same amount as the opposite side of the blade. So usually what I do is when I'm doing this, I'll go all the way down the length of the blade once, spending about 4 strokes per second in each section as I'm going. So be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I just kind of keep that rhythm going. And I go all the way to the end and all the way back down to the heel. And then I try to give it a check. I'll wipe off the slurry. And right there, this dry cloth is actually catching the burr. And you can hear it. I mean, you might not be able to hear it on the camera, but if you're sharpening, you'll hear it when you use either a paper towel. It scratches. And you can hear that scratch. And it's very fine. You can almost not feel it at all, except for maybe a little bit with your fingernail. Now, like I said, the lower grit stones, like your 60s and your 80s, especially the diamond grit stones, once you get your burr on that, the burr is usually pretty dramatic and is quite noticeable. Now, I don't like spending too much time in one area, but this little heel of this blade right there did not want to take. So I'm going to come down the whole length one more time. I still had a little bit of black marker on that heel that I could see. So I knew it wasn't allowing the edge to come all the way down. In fact, then I think about it. I'm going to dry this off real fast. I'm going to put a little bit of more marker right there, just to check to make sure. Do the whole thing. Right here particular. Like I said, when I go to check if I'm removing the marker, I always dry my stones first. That way, I'm not just washing the marker off of the blade. Yeah, see, right down here at the very bottom, there's just a little bit of marker still left behind. Whereas the rest of this blade, as I go right down the line, it is taking that marker off all the way to the edge in a nice, consistent line. So the only marker left behind is down here in this little heel. Yep, it's still just a little bit. And the only other marker is left on the flat part of the knife. Now, this is a straight blade, so there's no actual primary bevel. The whole blade is the bevel. So this is actually one of those few knives where it doesn't have a primary bevel like you would see on a different knife, like this machete right here. If you take a look at that machete, there's your primary bevel. All right, that's not actually what's cutting. If you look, you'll see this little bit of light shining off that edge. That's your secondary bevel, and that's actually what is referred to as the edge. And sometimes a knife can have up to 3 bevels. So you would have your primary bevel, and then your edge and then a micro bevel on the edge. Depending on the tool's application, depends on whether you would want to put a micro bevel on. But the only thing that is, all right, say I sharpen this at an 18-degree angle. What I would do to put a micro bevel on, when I got up to the polishing papers or the leather strap, the very, very last paper, I would make the angle steeper, say a 20 or 22 or even up to a 25-degree angle, so that it would change and give it just a little bit more of a pointier point. So I've almost got all of this marker off down here near the heel of the blade. Once I get that off, the rest of this blade is looking fantastic. So get a little more water on this, get a little bit more slurry. Now, if you decide to get yourself a whetstone or a rig, something like what I have, just remember that it can be pretty messy. Put a towel down. In my case, I've got a couple layers of paper towel down just to help absorb all of it, catch some of the slurry, and try to keep this area dry. Protect the wood of my workbench. I think I finally got it. Now, for the lower grit stones, it doesn't particularly have to go one direction or another. With these stones, I use a back and forth pattern all the way until I get to the polishing tapes, and then I change, and the leather strap. Then I change the stroking pattern. And I'll explain what I'm doing when I get to that point with those. But just trying to maintain a consistent angle, that same direction as you're grinding, will allow for a brighter, more beautiful polish at the end. Because changing that direction of your grind when you move up to the next grit is going to make a big difference. Like I said, if you look with the right light, you can see the stroke patterns and the angle that they're at. And so if you're not sure when you switch to your next grit what direction you were going to before, just look at the scratch patterns and you can see, and just keep that in mind as you're going. Because if you don't get all those scratches out, especially the ones from the earliest stones, then when you get all the way up to that mirror polish, you'll see little tiny micro scratches, and they'll stand out like a sore thumb. It's like when you get a scratch on your glasses and you've always just got that glare that's always right there. It's the same way. Now, I definitely got a bevel for sure. I just brushed that off and dried that off, and I have little pieces of paper towel everywhere. I'm going to hit this end of this just a little bit more. This might be the last pass. let's see. Actually, that tip on this side needs a little bit more work, just like the heel before. A lot of times when these knives come from the factory, nothing about this particular brand, and just knives in general, when they come from the factory edge can be very sharp, but it's not going to be Miller sharp, and it's not going to have a consistent sharpness. That's also why I'm sharpening this knife now. My friend had purchased this and was very underwhelmed with its sharpness right out the gate. So he took it out the box expecting it to have some kind of razor sharpness, and he was disappointed. So he said, "Hey Miller, can you make it Miller sharp for me?" I said, "Well, you know it ain't sharp till it's Miller sharp." Now we got that burr all the way down. Now where to put my flashlight? There it is. See, this is where I wish I had a GoPro, so you could see exactly what I'm seeing. In fact, here, maybe I can show you. Go. Let's get this camera to adjust. Can you see the difference right there near the tip? This spot right there. You see how it's not as exact as the rest of it? Like there's a little piece shining at a different angle. Right there. That's what I'm trying to clear up. Oh, come on, focus. That's it. That's it. You can still see a little bit of that marker right there. Just a little bit of that marker. Alright, so get right back to sharpening this. Yeah, see, now I just messed that up. If anybody caught that, I started going in the wrong direction. So I'm gonna have to make one more pass all the way down just to make sure that that stays consistent. Now, if the bevel of a blade is really messed up, I'll take it all the way down to one of my lowest grit diamond stones and reprofile the whole thing. But this 220 grit, it's pretty coarse compared to most. Even though it's coarse, these stones are a little less aggressive. These are silicon dioxide, and that's your most, or no, I'd have to check the package. They're either silicon dioxide or aluminum oxide, but they're not nearly as aggressive at removing material as the diamond stones. Obviously, the diamond stones are coated with diamonds and are a lot harder than the steel, so that's what allows the diamond stones to really get in it and take material away. They're not just called diamond stones. I mean, they really are. If you look at them, you can see the little sparkles. They're real diamonds. All right, now that's it. We got it. Check the heel on this side. Yep, we got it. So now I'm going to dry this off real quick. pop off my stone and switch to the next grit up, which since we did the 220, I'm going to go back to the 400, which is what I was looking at before. Did I set that somewhere else, or is it hiding from me? There she goes. And this thing's just so easy. These got little dovetails. You put them in there, you just push on the ball, pull that back, and it just, the spring in here just locks that right in. Super easy. It's a very similar system to the Hapstone, what I was seeing online, and the Edge Pro Apex. They all, in fact, these stones are universal between the Edge Pro Apex and the TSprof. There's a couple other systems that use those same stones as well, and you can get them from any manufacturer. These are, I got some here from the Gritomatic company. That actually is the company that I purchased my TSprof from, and Edge Pro also makes them. The finer and finer grit you get, the more expensive it's gonna be. And some of the grits that they have are like, for one stone like that can be like $60. And I'll tell you, any kind of knife making, the most costly thing is always going to be abrasives. So whether it's belts or grinding stones or sharpening stones or sandpaper, it's one of those consumables that it just adds up over time. And it's just the breaks of the game. You just got to figure that cost in for everything, that it is going to cost you materials. I have some belts over there that are $18 a belt. I mean, and that's as cheap as I can get them in certain cases. There's a few more styles of belts out there that I'd really like to try for my belt grinder. I'd like to try the Trizac belts, and I'd like to try some belts from Combat Abrasives. I've heard good reviews on them. Right now, the belts that I have, they're all ceramic belts or aluminum oxide belts, and they're all from 3M, which, you know, for the money and the value, that's, you know, gold standard right there. All right, so like I said before, we're do the opposite angle and should be able to take off all the scratches from the grit before. In other videos, you'll see me checking like this, just to see if I got all the scratches that are going this way erased and replaced with scratches going this way. And the finer and finer stones you go up to, the harder and harder it's going to be able to tell whether or not there's scratches there. All right, so just like that one, I'm going to go in reverse. Now this time, my downward strokes are going to go all towards the tip of the blade. And I'm going to try to keep that consistent. Whereas before, all the strokes were going towards the heel of the blade. And you want to get a nice full stroke too. You want to feel those springs on the stoppers bumping back and forth. That guarantees that you're getting the most use and the most wear out of your stones, because you're going to want them to wear as evenly as possible, because as you go along, and I've been sharpening things for quite a while now, and as you go along, you will find that they will belly in the middle. Now, I'm just using the top stone so you can see there's a little space in there, and that's because on this bottom stone there's a belly. It curves. I don't know how well you can see it, but it's thicker on the ends than it is in the middle, and that's going to happen with all of them. That's why they have to be replaced, and eventually they'll grind down to nothing and be completely useless. It takes a while. I mean, you definitely get your money's worth out of them. And if you've just got yourself a small rig and you're just sharpening your kitchen knives, you're not doing it professionally or sharpening knives for people like I've been doing, then one set of stones will last you years and years and years. Especially the lower ones, because once you've established an edge and sharpened it, then a lot of times you don't have to actually sharpen it again. All you have to do is use a honing rod or a honing paste, a leather strop. You'll see the barbers in the barber shop doing this. It's classic. When they rub the knife back and forth on the leather strop, what they're doing is they're honing it, which is basically just cleaning the edge of the blade. Because the blade's edge, as you use it, even if it's razor sharp, every time you cut something, you get these little bends in the metal, these little micro bends at the tip, and the metal starts to fold over just like that, becomes jagged and sharp. And what a honing rod does, or a leather strop, you'll see, if you've never heard of a honing rod, it's what you always see the chefs or Chef Ramsay or somebody, they grab the stick and they take the knife and they start hitting it right before they start cooking and cutting. And what that does is that just takes those little serrations off, and those little serrations are what makes it dull, because they're pieces of the metal bending over. And so after I sharpen this, he'll be able to keep it miller sharp for quite a while just by using a honing rod or one of those little ceramic things. Now, I don't really suggest using the little ceramic things with the V. I know they claim to keep them sharp. Those aren't sharpeners. Those are just little ceramic honing rods, and they work the same as a leather strop or something else. But if that little V is at, say, a 30-degree angle or a 40-degree angle, and your blade is at a 36-degree angle, you're going to dull it. You're going to make it worse. It's not going to match up. And so you're actually going to do more harm to your knife if you're not honing it at the same angle it is sharpened at. I've got a little book that I started, and I'm going to put the exact degree down for this blade, which we said was going to be 17.8. I'm going to put that down in there. So if he wants me to hit it with a strop later on, I can come back and I can set that strop to an 18, just a very fraction of a degree off. Fraction of a degree off. And that will take those little burrs off that you get from cooking. Yeah. Yeah, I messed up. I did 3 strokes in the wrong direction on this one, and I can see 3 scratches pretty much right where I did that. I'm a little distracted talking to you guys, but that's all right. This will save me talking in future videos. I won't have to explain it, every single detail of this again. That doesn't mean I won't explain what I'm doing for other videos, but it'll allow me a little bit more time to focus on the knives themselves. And if you stay tuned on my channel and smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, anybody who's subscribed will get notifications, especially if they push the little bell button, and you'll be first in line to watch my very first forging video. Now, it's not going to be the first knife that I've forged, and I might have a couple more videos coming up before I start forging. I've got a lot of work still in my workshop left to do to get it right and ready before I can fire up that bad boy and start hammering on some hot steel. But pretty soon you'll get a notification on your phone saying Miller Sharp has uploaded a new video, and that'll be me hammering on a piece of iron, a piece of steel, and making something from scratch. So just keep your eyes out for that. I'm just eager to get that forge fired up and start making some stuff, because that's what got me into knife working in the first place. And get this, forged in fire. Yep, I'm gonna admit it. I got hooked on that show by accident years ago. I think it was either season 1 or season 2, and I was hooked. I started watching it more and more over the years. Even got my 85-year-old grandmother to sit down and watch it. And I'll tell you what, when they would do the testing and somebody like Ben Abbott would wail on an antler and break a knife and it would shatter, oh, she'd sit there, she'd go, oh my. And we'd laugh, and it was nice. It was a good time watching it with her. She was into it too. And I talked to her about doing it, and she was actually kind of supportive in my idea. She believed that I could, and she thought it was a good idea. She knew I was creative. She knew I liked making things and being crafty. And it wasn't until after she passed away that I was sitting there bored and sad and lonely, missing her every day. And I saw an episode of Forge and Fire popped up, and I was like, you know what? I need a new hobby. I need to do it. And I started looking up how to forge, how to make a knife. And the YouTube rabbit hole just got deeper and deeper until I could just close my eyes and see how to do it. And it was that night that I was sitting there watching Forged in Fire after my grandma was gone. And I've been watching this show for, like I said, years. And this guy takes a knife and he quenches it in water. And I'm like, oh my God, that's going to cause his knife to crack. And sure enough, as soon as the words left my mouth, the judges said the exact same thing. They said, oh, that's going to cause a fracture in his blade. Sure enough, at the end of that episode, his knife shattered. It broke for sure. And I started thinking that night, like as I was feeling this need to want to have a new hobby, I was thinking, My goodness, I've been watching this show long enough that I'm saying the things that the judges are saying before they even say it. I had learned almost how to forge just from watching that show. And now I still, nothing beats experience, as you know, what teaches you. So I sat there and I thought about it as I was watching the videos on how to do it. And I would close my eyes and I could just imagine everything step from step, from start to finish, exactly how to do it and what I would do. So I decided I was going to go and grab a forge. And luckily, when I bought the little coal forge behind me and found on Facebook Marketplace, God, I love that thing. The guy tossed in a piece of railroad track. It was like serendipity. You know, when things just happen by accident and they're just meant to be. And he even gave me a little piece of walnut. And I took and cut a piece of that walnut off. And I took an Allen wrench that I had found. And that's when I forged my first knife out of. An Allen key, slapped on the walnut onto the handle. And that's the knife that you saw in one of my previous videos. If I can figure out how to do it, I'll put a link up here or up here somewhere. But I'll let you see that. That knife was actually given away as a gift to somebody that I care about. And I'll explain more about that in a later video. But I am running out of time. And I have one more stone to do before moving to my polishing tapes. Once I get that done, we'll do a quick cutting test. I forgot to mention that last stone was 600, and this stone, this final stone that I'm using, is a 1000 grit stone. I mean, it's smooth. It feels almost as smooth as your countertop. And if you have a sharpener at home, you can hear the difference between the lower grits and the higher grits. You can. This sounds like smooth sand grinding. Now I'm just looking at where the scratch patterns were on the last grit and going opposite. Now a lot of times when people get up to the 1000 grit, they will do a single downward motion, not going back and forth, but that's not the technique that I use. I continue on going back and forth with the stones, just like this, until I'm ready to hit it with a leather strop or a polishing tape. Now that is it. That is golden. That is gorgeous. Yep. Now to double check the degree, I almost forgot. Make sure this still consistent. Calibrate that. Yep, okay. And over here. Perfect. All right, so now I'm going to take that same thing, little green tea with honey, so good. It's also local Maryland honey. For those of you who don't know, I am Baltimore born and raised, and I live in Maryland. For all those people out there that are like, there's only one Baltimore and it's in Maryland. It's obvious if you live in Baltimore that, you live in Maryland. We're not stupid, Miller. It's Baltimore, Ohio. Look it up. That's just for clarification. All right, so here we go. Here's my 2000 grit. Now, when I do these polishing papers, I keep it at the same angle, right? Which, in fact, I have to dial this back up because it's not quite the same thickness as the other one. So I do have to make the adjustment every time I switch from the stones to the papers. Now these polishing tapes or papers, whatever you want to call them, now you still do the same thing. You look to see where your grits are, where your little lines are. And now, like I said, they're so fine. It's so small now, it's incredibly hard to see. But now, instead of going forward and backwards, you never go against the grain, against the blade with your papers or your strop, because they are so soft and delicate, especially a cowhide leather strop, that you will cut right into it and ruin it. Also, just like when you're honing a knife with a honing rod, you don't want to dig into the steel. You're digging into the steel when you're sharpening. This, you're just polishing that edge. So you don't want to dig. You don't want to dig into it. So you just downward strokes, get the whole thing, and as you go, you'll see with this 2000 grit stone, it comes nice and shiny. And you only have to go back and forth like once or twice. Move up to the 3000 grit. Now I can almost not see that at all. Like I said, once you get done the first stone, the process goes quicker and quicker. This is also how you get a mirror edge. Beautiful, glossy shine. You know, 1,000 years ago, or whatever it was, when they started making telescopes, well, 100 years ago, sorry, when they started making really powerful telescopes using mirrors instead of just lenses, they would polish those mirrors with grits up to like 40,000 stones and papers, whatever they used. It was like 40,000 grit so that they could get those mirrors absolutely the most shiniest that they could get. So I'm following that same principle with these knives. And there we go. Now I know some of you guys are like, oh, well, why didn't you use the leather strop? Leather strop is great. And, you know, I could, except that the polishing compound is actually less than the papers. And it's not going to polish the edge the same as these papers would. So if I just wanted a knife sharp, and it was just like a utility knife, and it didn't have to have a perfect mirror's edge, then yeah, what I would do is I would just go all the way up to my 1000 grit stone and hit it with the strop, and it's perfectly fine. But I wanted to give this gentleman a knife that would just cut the meat when it just looked at it. I'm gonna bring this camera up here and let you see this edge close up before we do a cut test. Ooh, look at that shine. Look at that. You can see my fingers in the reflection. That is gorgeous. Watch, you can even see my light. Now, if you look, you can see little itty bitty teeny tiny micro scratches when I hit this light on there. You can't see them with the naked eye, not unless you hit it with a light just right. But then again, it doesn't have to be a perfect mirror. It just has to cut sharp. I'm not a mirror maker. I'm a knife maker and a sharpener. So let me get this bad boy out of here because I am out of time and it is time to go. I'm hungry also. Going to a little Italian spot near us. It's called Rosario's. All the reviews are great. So I wanted to go check it out. I'm in the mood for a chicken parm. Get this out of here. I'm not going to edit this video either, so you're going to see me take this out, take off this tape, and cut. So there's no tomfoolery around with these videos. I didn't sharpen it with this or something else and come back and change anything. Let me see. Here we go. Set that down gently. All right, for the classic paper test. Woo! Oop, snagged it. There we go. Look at that. Ooh. All right, time for the shave test. Oh my. There's my hair. And that was effortless. All right, guys. Thank you for watching my video. If you've got any requests for anything in the future, leave a comment down below. Don't hurt yourself smashing that like button, but definitely smash it and smash it good. See you next time. Oh, and remember, it's not sharp unless it's Miller sharp.